The morning air in Lagos buzzed with noise from traffic below, but inside the glass-walled office of Apex Innovations, everything was painfully quiet. Zuri Okafor sat across from her boss, Mr. Adewale, a man who enjoyed watching people squirm. His expensive cologne filled the room as he leaned back in his chair with a smug smile. "So, you think you're smarter than me, Zuri?" he said, tapping his pen on the desk. "You're done here." Zuri blinked, confused. "You're firing me? After all the work I've done for this company." He gave a lazy shrug. "This is business, not charity. You're too ambitious for your position. It's time to move on." Her hands trembled slightly, but she forced herself to stay calm. Deep down, she knew this had nothing to do with her performance. It started the day she rejected his advances and proved him wrong in front of investors. Ever since then, he'd been waiting for a chance to get rid of her. She stood up slowly, her voice steady even though her heart was pounding. "Thank you for the opportunity, sir." He smirked again, mistaking her calm for defeat. Zuri walked out of the office, holding a small box filled with her files and personal items. The entire floor went silent. Some of her co-workers looked away. Others gave her sympathetic glances, but said nothing. She walked past them with her head high, refusing to let him see her break. What Adewale didn't know was that Zuri wasn't leaving empty-handed. Hidden in that box was the original blueprint of Project Lightwave, the clean energy design that could change everything. And the patent he thought he owned? It was registered in her name. He had no idea the woman he just fired was the one person who could destroy, or save, his empire. That evening, Zuri sat in her small one-bedroom apartment in Yaba, staring at the old folder lying on her desk. The words Project Lightwave were written across it in fading ink, her handwriting from years ago. She brushed her fingers over the cover, her mind replaying everything that had just happened at work. The humiliation, the silence, the look on Adewale's face when he told her she was too ambitious. She opened the folder slowly. Inside were neatly folded blueprints, scribbled notes, and technical sketches, the heart of a project she had once poured her soul into. Project Lightwave wasn't just an idea. It was her dream, a clean energy system that could power entire cities by converting solar frequency into continuous electrical flow. She had built the first model in her father's garage back when she was still in university. Her late father, a brilliant inventor himself, had helped her register the patent. But for safety, they used his name, ENGR. Chike Okafor, since Zuri was young and didn't trust the corporate world to respect her as a woman. After he passed away, she quietly transferred the ownership to herself, keeping the documents hidden. At work, Adewale had once laughed at her when she brought up the concept. "Solar frequency conversion?" he had said, chuckling. "You watch too many movies, Zuri. Stick to regular engineering." The whole office had joined in his laughter. That day, she decided she'd never mention Lightwave again. Now, as she sat in her small apartment surrounded by half-finished prototypes and empty coffee cups, she scrolled through her phone absent-mindedly. A headline flashed across her screen. Apex Innovations to present revolutionary energy project to South African investors. Deal worth $200 million. Zuri froze. Beneath the headline was a photo of Adewale shaking hands with investors, standing proudly beside a presentation slide that read Project Lightwave. Her stomach dropped. She clicked the article and read every line carefully. It described the exact same concept, her concept, the same system, the same diagram she had drawn by hand. He hadn't even changed the name. Zuri's shock slowly turned into a cold, bitter laugh. "Oh, Adewale," she whispered. "You just fired the wrong person." She stood up, walked to her small bookshelf, and pulled out an envelope from behind her father's framed photo. Inside were the official patent documents, signed, stamped, and dated years before she ever joined Apex. Her name, Zuri Kayamika Okafor, was printed clearly as the patent holder. Holding the papers, she felt something shift inside her. The pain of losing her job faded, replaced by quiet determination. Adewale thought he had ended her career, but he had no idea what was coming. She placed the folder back on the desk, her eyes burning with focus. "You want to sell Lightwave for $200 million? She murmured. "Let's see how far you get without the real owner." For the first time in weeks, Zuri smiled, not out of happiness but out of power. The secret she had kept for years was about to change everything. A few days later, the top floor of a luxury hotel in Victoria Island was buzzing with excitement. Mr. Adewale stood at the center of a sleek conference room, surrounded by men in sharp suits and women with expensive handbags. It was the biggest meeting of his career, the one that could make him a millionaire overnight. He grinned confidently as the presentation screen behind him flashed the title, Project Lightwave, the Future of African Energy. "Gentlemen and ladies," he began smoothly, pacing across the room, "this project will redefine renewable energy across the continent. With Lightwave, we can power entire cities using just solar frequency conversion. It's sustainable, scalable, and ready for investment. The South African investors nodded, impressed. Cameras clicked. Champagne waited on ice in the corner of the room. Everything looked perfect. Adewale was in his element, charming and boastful, enjoying the attention. At the head of the table sat Dr. Thabo Ndlovu, a respected energy magnate, known for his sharp mind and zero tolerance for dishonesty. He listened carefully, his expression unreadable. When Adewale finished his pitch, the room burst into polite applause. Impressive, Dr. Ndlovu said finally. You said this system is fully developed in-house, yes? Adewale smiled wide. Absolutely. My team at Apex Innovations created it from the ground up. Every part of this technology is our intellectual property. Dr. Ndlovu leaned back slightly, folding his hand. Excellent. Our legal team will verify the patent registration before we sign the deal. You understand, of course, $200 million is no small investment. For a second, Adewale's smile faltered. It was quick, so quick most people missed it, but Dr. Ndlovu didn't. Of course, Adewale replied, forcing a light laugh. You'll find everything in order. The investors nodded and moved on to discuss logistics, timelines, and publicity plans. But behind Adewale's confident facade, panic began to creep in. His shirt collar suddenly felt tighter. His palms were damp. He knew the truth. The patent paperwork wasn't finalized. It was supposed to be handled by Zuri, the company's best engineer, and the only one who truly understood the legal and technical sides of lightweight. But Zuri was gone. He had fired her before she could finish processing the document. He told himself it would be fine. After all, who would know? She was probably still angry, job hunting, trying to move on. He had access to the project files, the designs, the data, everything. Or so he thought. As the investors raised their glasses to toast the future of African innovation, Adewale forced a smile and clinked his champagne flute against Dr. Ndlovu's. But deep down, he could feel it, a quiet unease gnawing at him. Something was off, something he had overlooked. While he celebrated, somewhere in Lagos, Zuri Okafor was preparing to remind him exactly who really created lightweight. It was a quiet morning in the Apex Innovations office, when everything changed. Mr. Adewale was in his glass-walled corner office, sipping his imported coffee and scrolling through his email. He was still riding high from the investor meeting, the praise, the handshakes, the promise of millions. He could already picture the headlines calling him the visionary behind Africa's next big energy revolution. Then he saw it. A new message had just landed in his inbox. The subject line read, Legal Notice, Patent Infringement Project Lightweight. He frowned and clicked it open. The sender's name froze him in place, Okafor & Co. Legal Services. He knew that name. It was Zuri's father's old law firm. The email was short and direct. Cease and desist from presenting, distributing, or profiting from patent no. NG 2174, LW, property of Zuri Kayamaka Okafor. Any continued use of this patent without authorization will result in immediate legal action. For a moment, Adewale didn't move. He just stared at the screen. Then he read it again and again, as if the words would somehow change. What? He muttered under his breath. That patent was company property. His assistant, Bola, who had just walked in with a stack of files, paused when she saw his expression. Sir? Is everything okay? Adewale shoved the laptop toward her. Look at this. She's claiming ownership of Lightweight. That's impossible. She worked on it here. Bola scanned the message carefully, her face draining of color. Sir, I think she filed it personally. The records show her name was on the design years before she joined Apex. Adewale's jaw tightened. No, that can't be. I gave that presentation. I led the project. Maybe, Bola said hesitantly, but it looks like the technology was hers from the start. Just then, his phone started buzzing nonstop. Calls from the South African investors. Missed calls. Messages. His stomach turned. He opened one from Dr. Ndlovu. We've just received a legal claim against your company regarding the Lightwave patent. Until this is resolved, our deal is suspended. Adewale's hands began to shake. The $200 million deal frozen. His dream slipping through his fingers. He stood up, pacing the room. Find out how she did this. Get the legal team. She can't do this to me. But Bola didn't move. Sir, she said softly, I think she already has. Adewale stopped pacing. His reflection in the office glass looked smaller than usual. The confident man from last week was gone. In his place stood someone cornered, exposed. He sank into his chair, his mind spinning. Zuri, the quiet engineer he underestimated, the woman he fired without a second thought. She had been 2 steps ahead all along. As the phone kept ringing, Adewale closed his eyes. For the first time, he felt something he hadn't felt in years, real fear. A week later, the tension inside the Apex Innovations boardroom could be cut with a knife. The long mahogany table gleamed under the bright lights, surrounded by investors, lawyers, and company executives. Everyone was waiting. At the far end sat Adewale, his jaw tight, his smile forced. He had spent the entire week trying to control the damage, sending frantic emails and making desperate calls. But the investors had insisted on meeting one person, Zuri Kayamaka Okafor. The door opened and Zuri walked in. She wasn't in her usual work clothes this time. Instead, she wore a tailored navy blue suit that gave her an air of quiet confidence. Every eye in the room turned to her. The once silent engineer had returned, but now she wasn't an employee. She was the owner of the patent everyone was fighting over. Adewale's face turned red as he jumped to his feet. "You have no right to be here," he snapped. His voice cracked slightly, betraying the panic he was trying to hide. Zuri didn't flinch. She walked to the center of the room, placed a thick folder on the table, and opened it carefully. "Actually," she said in a calm, steady tone, "I have every right. You tried to sell something you don't own." Gasps rippled through the room. The investors leaned forward as she slid the official patent documents across the table, the same papers she had kept hidden for years. Her name was printed clearly at the top, Zuri Kayamaka Okafor, inventor and patent holder of Project Lightweight. Dr. Tabo Ndlovu, seated beside the other investors, adjusted his glasses and examined the papers carefully. Then he looked up at her, a slow smile forming on his face. "Impressive," he said. "Our legal team confirmed the same documents. Miss Okafor, we'd like to discuss direct collaboration with you." Adewale's mouth fell open. "What? You can't do that. She worked for me. This was my company's project." Dr. Ndlovu turned to him sharply. "No, Mr. Adewale. According to our findings, this project was created and patented long before your company existed. You tried to sell technology that doesn't belong to you." The room went quiet. All eyes shifted away from Adewale. His authority, his confidence, everything he built, crumbled in front of him. Zuri met his gaze one last time. "You fired me because you were afraid I'd outshine you," she said softly. "Looks like your fear came true." Adewale tried to speak, but the investors ignored him completely. They were already discussing terms with Zuri, the real innovator, the woman he underestimated. For the first time, the balance of power had completely shifted. The man who once controlled her career now had to watch her take control of the very empire he tried to steal. And as Zuri sat at the head of the table, signing the new documents, everyone in that room understood one thing. She wasn't coming back to take her old job. She was coming back to take her place. The boardroom felt different now. The same space that once belonged to Adewale was filled with quiet awe as the meeting drew to an end. Papers were spread across the table, and Zuri sat at the head, her pen poised above a document that could change her life forever. Across from her, Dr. Tabo Ndlovu smiled with admiration. "Miss Okafor," he said warmly, "we'd like to offer you a full partnership. You'll lead your own branch under Ndlovu Industries, Okafor Energy System. You'll have 70% ownership of Lightwave's profits and full creative control. We'll provide the resources and network to scale it globally." For a moment, Zuri just sat there, stunned. The same project her boss once mocked as unrealistic was now valued at $200 million. It felt surreal, like the universe was finally correcting itself. Adewale sat a few seats away, silent, pale, his tie slightly loosened. He looked like a man watching his empire slip through his fingers. The investors who once surrounded him now barely acknowledged his presence. Every smile, every handshake, every question, it was all directed at Zuri. She signed the contract slowly, each stroke of the pen heavy with satisfaction. When she was done, the room broke into applause. Cameras clicked. Hands reached out to congratulate her. Dr. Ndlovu shook her hand firmly. "Welcome aboard, Miss Okafor. You're about to light up the continent." Zuri smiled, feeling a mix of pride and peace. She had fought so hard to protect her dream, not through revenge, but through quiet determination. Before she left, she turned to Adewale. He sat frozen, his eyes empty, his hands clenched on the table. She walked closer and spoke in a calm, almost gentle tone. "You fired me because you thought you could silence me," she said softly. "But you just helped me find my freedom." He didn't answer. He couldn't. The man who once towered over her now looked small, broken under the weight of his own pride. Zuri picked up her folder, nodded politely to the investors, and walked toward the exit. The glass doors closed behind her with a quiet click, leaving Adewale alone in the silence. As she stepped out into the warm Lagos sunlight, she took a deep breath. The city buzzed with energy, and for the first time, she felt like she truly belonged in its rhythm. She wasn't just an engineer anymore. She was a visionary, a leader, the rightful owner of the dream she had built with her own hands. Inside the boardroom, Adewale still sat in shock, staring at the signed papers that sealed his fate. Everything he had wanted, the money, the recognition, the success, now belonged to the woman he had underestimated. And Zuri Okafor walked away, her head high, finally free and fully in control of the future she created. Only a few months later, everything that once made Apex Innovations powerful began to fall apart. What used to be one of Lagos's most talked-about tech companies was now barely holding itself together. Investors pulled out one after another, their trust gone. The board blamed Adewale for the collapse, and major partners withdrew their contracts without looking back. The once busy office floors that buzzed with activity were now quiet. Desks sat empty. Computers gathered dust. Even the company logo in the lobby looked faded, as if the building itself had lost hope. Many of the best engineers and staff had resigned and joined Okafor Energy Systems, Zuri's new firm. They said they wanted to work somewhere that valued innovation and integrity. Within a short time, her company became the new shining star of Nigeria's energy industry, growing faster than anyone expected. Meanwhile, Adewale's world kept crumbling. News spread about his attempt to sell a stolen patent, and lawsuits followed, first from Zuri, then from investors accusing him of fraud and breach of contract. Whispers of his workplace misconduct began to surface too. People he once intimidated were now speaking openly. His name, once respected, became a warning. One evening, he sat alone in his office, the same place where he had once fired Zuri with a smirk. The large desk that had symbolized power was now covered in unopened letters and court documents. The phones had stopped ringing. His assistant was gone. The silence was deafening. He looked around and saw the empty chairs, the blank walls, the company he had built on pride now turning to ashes. For the first time, he understood what it meant to lose everything, not just money, but respect, reputation, and purpose. The same arrogance that had made him feel untouchable had finally left him with nothing. On the other side of the city, Zuri's face appeared on national television. The host smiled as the screen behind her showed images of rural villages glowing with new solar-powered lights, all powered by Project Lightweight. And tonight, the host announced proudly, we celebrate Africa's Young Innovator of the Year, Zuri Kayamaka Okafor. The audience applauded loudly as Zuri walked on stage in a simple white suit, her calm confidence lighting up the room. When asked what motivated her success, she smiled thoughtfully before answering. I didn't fight back to destroy anyone, she said softly. I fought to protect what I built with honesty. Her words echoed across the country, shared on social media, replayed on news channels, and quoted by young dreamers everywhere. That night, as the world celebrated her victory, Adewale watched her interview from his dimly lit office. The TV flickered, showing the woman he once tried to silence, now standing tall, respected, and unstoppable. He turned off the screen and lowered his head into his hands. Zuri hadn't just won a battle. She had rewritten the story. It was late in the evening when Zuri's phone rang. She was sitting by the window of her apartment, looking out at the bright Lagos skyline, a view that now felt like hers to claim. She had just wrapped up another long day at Okafor Energy System, finalizing a new project that would bring clean energy to more rural communities. The phone buzzed again. When she looked at the screen, her heart skipped for a second. The name flashing across it was one she never expected to see again, Adewale. For a moment, she considered ignoring it, but something inside her told her to answer. She picked up slowly and said, "Hello." The voice on the other end was quiet and shaky. "Zuri," he began, his tone weak and tired. "I lost everything. Please, I need your help." There was a long silence. She could hear the sound of cars passing faintly in the background, but mostly it was just his breathing, heavy and desperate. Zuri's voice was calm when she finally spoke. "You didn't just fire me, Adewale. You tried to erase me." He sighed deeply, his words breaking as he spoke. "I know. I was jealous. You were better than me, and I couldn't handle it. I thought if I got rid of you, I'd stay on top. But I was wrong. You built everything I wanted, and you did it with integrity." Zuri didn't say anything right away. She remembered the look on his face that day in the office, the arrogance, the smirk, the way he dismissed her like she didn't matter. And yet, now, his voice sounded nothing like that man. He sounded lost. Her tone softened, but she stayed firm. "Adewale," she said quietly, "life has a way of teaching lessons that no one else can. Some lessons are meant to hurt." He was silent. She could hear a faint sniffle, the sound of a man realizing too late what his pride had cost him. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "Truly." "I know," she replied, her voice steady but kind. "I forgave you a long time ago. But forgiveness doesn't mean going back." There was nothing left to say. She let a few seconds pass, listening to the silence between them. Two people who once shared the same dream, but walked very different paths. "Take care of yourself," she said softly, and ended the call. For a moment, Zuri just sat there, the phone still in her hand. But instead of anger or bitterness, all she felt was peace. She realized she had already won, not by defeating him, but by growing beyond the pain he caused. Outside, the city lights flickered like stars. Zuri smiled to herself and whispered, "Some endings are just new beginnings in disguise." Then she closed her eyes, finally free. Months later, the sky over Enugu was soft and golden, the kind of evening that made the world feel gentle. Zuri walked quietly along a narrow path lined with tall trees, holding a bouquet of bright yellow sunflower, her father's favorite. She reached the small cemetery where his grave stood, the stone polished and clean. The name Yengr. Chaik Okafor was carved deeply into it, along with the words, "A man who built with love and truth." She knelt down and placed the flowers carefully at the base of the tombstone. For a moment, she said nothing. The wind was calm, the air smelled of fresh earth, and the sounds of children laughing echoed faintly from a nearby hill. "Papa," she whispered, her voice warm and steady. "Your lessons saved me." She brushed her fingers over his name and smiled softly. "You told me never to give away my ideas, no matter who doubted me. You said real success isn't about money, it's about impact. And you were right." Her eyes glistened, but not with sadness, with gratitude. Everything she had fought for, every sleepless night, every tear she had held back, had brought her here. Just then, the sound of small feet running caught her attention. She turned to see a young boy in a school uniform racing toward her, his face glowing with excitement. "Auntie Zuri! Auntie Zuri!" he called out, waving his arms. "We just powered the whole village with lightweight." Zuri stood up quickly, her heart swelling with pride. "Really?" she asked, kneeling to meet his eyes. He nodded eagerly. The lights came on all at once. Everyone was shouting and clapping. Even Grandma cried. She said she's never seen the village so bright before. Zuri laughed, tears of joy spilling down her cheeks. She hugged the boy tightly. "That's wonderful, Chabik. You see, this is why we built it." As the boy ran off again toward the distant laughter, Zuri turned back to her father's grave. The sun was setting behind her, casting a warm orange glow over the field. "Papa," she said softly, "we did it. Lightwave isn't just a project anymore, it's changing lives. Kids can study at night now. Families can keep their homes lit. Villages that used to go dark are shining again." She smiled through her tears. "I wish you were here to see it. But I know you're proud." For a long moment, she stood there in peaceful silence, watching the horizon fade into twilight. The woman who once walked out of an office with a box of files had come full circle, from being underestimated to becoming a symbol of hope. Zuri took one last look at the grave, whispered, "Thank you, Papa," and walked away with her head high. Behind her, the setting sun lit up the sky, just like Lightwave was now lighting up Africa. The morning sun poured through the tall glass windows of Okafor Energy Systems headquarters, filling the halls with golden light. The building buzzed with life, young engineers discussing new designs, developers typing away on laptops, and interns excitedly talking about the next big project. Every corner of the space carried energy, hope, and purpose. Zuri walked slowly through the bright corridor, greeting her team with a warm smile. Some still looked at her in quiet admiration. The woman who had once been fired for being too ambitious now owned one of the fastest-growing clean energy companies in Africa. Her heels clicked softly against the polished floor as she passed by walls decorated with photos of solar fields, community projects, and smiling children under newly powered lights. Her voice played softly in the background, almost like a memory. "He thought firing me would end my story. But sometimes rejection is just redirection." She entered her office, a large but simple space with plants by the window and books neatly stacked on the shelves. On the wall behind her desk hung a framed quote in elegant lettering. "Protect your vision, even if no one else sees it yet." Zuri paused to look at it for a moment, her reflection faintly shining in the glass frame. That line had carried her through everything, the doubt, the betrayal, the struggle. She walked to the window and looked out at the sunrise spreading over Lagos, lighting up the skyline. The city looked alive, full of promise, just like her journey. A small smile touched her lips as the camera pulled back, revealing the glowing sign outside her building. Okafor Energy Systems, lighting Africa's future. Her story had started with loss, but it ended with light, her own light, shared with the world.